Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us today. I hope you guys are having a great start to your summer. My name is Gamaley. I'm a product manager here at XTRM, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. If you guys have any questions, once again, feel free to ask them at the end of our call here, or put them in the chat. We'll be able to address those once we finish up with our panel. So the focus of today's webinar is going to be discussing multi-factor authentication, how it generally works today, including common issues and challenges that we face. And then we're going to dig into a brand new alternative method that we think you guys are going to find very interesting. So, first things first, let me introduce our two panel members for today's webinar. With us, we have Richard Grogan-Crane, the CEO of XTRM.
Pleased to be here.
Everyone say hi to Richard. And then we also have along him, Motwani, the CEO of Cyphlens.
Great. Thanks for having me, Lev, and the XTRM team, and thanks for everyone for joining.
Yeah, once again, thanks for your time, guys, today, out of your busy schedules, to give us a little bit of education of what's going on with the SMS and MFA. So to kick things off, really, Rick, if you could just give us a little bit of background of what XTRM does and, kind of the bread and butter of what XTRM's business is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to do that. So XTRM is a fintech company. We're about 10 years old now, and our core business is to move money efficiently and effectively around the world for our customers. Our prime business is in B2B and B2C payments, and we do it in a very sort of modern, efficient way, using a wallet architecture to make the process of moving money as cheap and as efficient and as fast and as manageable as we possibly can. We have about 25,000 companies using our system globally, and we cover almost 130 currencies worldwide.
Yeah, thank you for that quick summary. So, Rocky, same question for you here. What does Cyphlens do, and what's the product offering from Cyphlens?
Yeah, sure. We're a cybersecurity company, and I think, look, I started Cyphlens after getting hit with a SIM swap attack. And for folks who may not know what that is, that's when a hacker basically took over my phone number and started getting every text message that I received, right? And that included all the SMS messages, as well as a bunch of personal messages, right, for a period of time. And that just showed me how broken the existing authentication system really is. And that's what led me to start Cyphlens. And Cyphlens, really, we're focused on protecting data when encryption stops working, right? It's the moment, what we call the visibility layer, or the last mile, right? When that SMS message appears on your phone, you can read those 6 digits. And that's when it's actually being viewed by a human, and it's the riskiest part of the digital journey. So our flagship product, right, that we're here to talk a bit about today is our phishing-proof MFA. Right, it uses visual encryption on your smartphone. There's no hardware keys. There's no SMS. There's no push notifications. And I think we're going to dive in a bit deeper. But I just want to also say that we're really proud to work with a forward-thinking partner like Rick and the XTRM team, right? And they don't want to just tick the security box. They want to lead with it without compromising the user experience. And that's the kind of leadership that really matters in payments and financial services. And I think a lot of us have worked in the industry for a while, right? The adversaries aren't stopping, and you need to be kind of thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, and I think that's what XTRM is really focused on doing for its customer base.
Yeah, so I guess just to dive in a little bit deeper, with the Cyphlens side of things here. So why does it seem that MFA methods that are kind of traditional, so SMS, email notifications, and the traditional kind of MFA factors are not really working anymore? What are you guys seeing? What's kind of driven the Cyphlens to fruition?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really simple premise, right? The attackers are adapting faster than the defenses, right? And AI is making that exponentially harder, right? They're a motivated, coordinated, aggressive group, and they are looking at, kind of the changing nature of what's happening with AI to basically exploit things like SMS code. So where they used to do SIM swap attacks, now they're leveraging social engineering to basically make any sort of MFA relying on a one-time passcode almost useless. Right, or even push notifications, right? One accidental tap and you're compromised. So everything that's sent via, text or email, you have to assume is either getting intercepted by a hacker, right? Or you've got to assume that someone can socially engineer that. And as you're seeing now with the kind of advance of the AI and the deep fakes, you've got attackers who are really effective at posing as IT support professionals, posing as maybe their extreme customer service. And they know things about the individuals that they're targeting that they didn't know before, right? They're digesting all your social media accounts, the way you operate, right? All stuff that's publicly available. And these AI powered chatbots just make, one-time passcode really useless, right? For anything that's sort of meaningful, like, your money and your entity's money, right? How to move that on. There's a stat that I like to show that 74% of breaches in 2023 involve the human element, right? And so whenever you've got the human in the loop, either receiving a text message, or basically being able to share a phone number like they did to me at the AT&T store, right? All the social engineering, that number is just going higher with AI. So there's a quote I gave Richard, I think, a long time ago. I said, look, using your legacy MFA is like locking your front door, but leaving the key under the mat, right? That's how kind of obvious this security gap is today.
Yeah. So it seems like, I mean, based off what you mentioned, there's a lot of potential use cases for the MFA, right? In both the Extreme platform and in general. But I guess just to tie this back to Extreme, Rick, where are we seeing issues with MFA on the Extreme side of things, and how it's currently being utilized as a multi-factor?
Yeah, thanks, Lev. I mean, for our business, we're in the business of moving money. Okay, so we are sort of a center target for hackers, for people that want to do nefarious stuff, because the reward is money. Okay, in our business, it's very, very difficult. And to give you an idea, about 65% of the traffic that comes to our website is purely coming from people that are trying to do some kind of a hack, some kind of attack, some kind of a theft. And so for us, it's a constantly moving target. That's been accelerated, as Rocky highlighted, with the advent of AI. We have seen this in our business accelerating over the last year, 2 years. And we've had to increase our focus on the security of the overall platform, of which, multi-factor authentication is a big part of it, right? That's the sort of entry door into our platform. And it's the first set of barriers against any kind of an attack. And with that said, what we have right now with the traditional MFA, it just isn't sufficient. It really isn't. As we went through the process of reviewing our security, which we do constantly, we came to the conclusion that what we had in place, which was the traditional SMS, the traditional email, wasn't good enough. It just wasn't good enough. Other areas of the industry are more mature, certainly in the sense of sort of, interval security and other stuff, more secure. But this area wasn't particularly addressed to the level other areas were addressed. So when we realized this, we started to look for something that could provide us another layer of security at that multi-factor authentication layer. And frankly, there isn't anything really on the market other than what I've seen from Cyphlens that comes even close to what we needed. So luckily for Rocky, he doesn't have a lot of competition. As a buyer, it's phenomenal. The technology is exactly what we needed. It's that remote device-based security that doesn't rely on numbers, it blows apart the requirement to worry about people handing over those credentials to some kind of phishing or AI-based generative way of grabbing that data. And it's a perfect solution for us, and we've deployed it and are rolling it out to our entire customer base as the prime method of getting through the front door of Extreme.
So it seems like there's a lot of places where you guys want to stick, the Cyphlens MFA capabilities. I guess, Rocky, just to bring us back to you guys, what's the experience like? You know what I mean? If it's going to be utilized in so many places, if within Extreme, for every login, essentially, what's the process like? Is it streamlined? Is it easy?
Yeah, it's it's ridiculously simple. We call it swipe authentication, right? And then here's how it works. Enter your username. You're going to see a visual code on screen, right? A visual challenge. You're simply going to point your camera right at that image through the Cyphlens app. You're going to scan it. You're going to swipe right, and you're in, right? No codes, no text, no stress. It's phishing proof. Attackers can't socially engineer you to give up that code because there's nothing to share, right? Even if they have your username and password, it feels like magic. And it's really unusual, right? When you think about security tools that have been deployed over the last 10, 20, 30 years, they always get the security part right, but they get the user experience part wrong. And it's a terrible user experience. I think as Extreme has done extensive testing with us, as our other clients have been testing the product and deploying it, the user experience, right, as you get used to it and you start to leverage Cyphlens, you can't go back, right? You can't actually imagine why you were entering all those 6-digit codes, why you were doing tap touches on your phone. It's that simple and beautiful from an experience perspective.
Yeah, that sounds simple enough, right? So I think, with being in part of a quintessential login process, being very simple and punchy is very critical, right?
Yeah, I'd like to just add a bit to that. Sorry, Lev. This is a huge part of the process of deciding what we'd use goes down to usability, and I can't overemphasize enough how simple it is to use. Okay, the audience for us is businesses. They're a bit more resilient, but we also process money to tens of millions of individuals all over the world. Okay, so to be clear here, this is a global platform. Okay, not restricted by geography. And to reiterate again what Rocky said, the experience when you point, the visual is like a QR code. Okay, if you're familiar with the QR code, it's not actually a QR code, but it's something more complex than that. But that's what it looks like to the average person. They just point and swipe. And so for our audience, we've got many unsophisticated users all over the world, sophisticated in their own domain, but not necessarily on using technology. It is really simple, and for that was a major selective criteria for us.
I'll just add one more thing to that, because there's a lot when Richard approached us about our solution and some of the challenges. One of them was just deliverability, right? You've got to wait for the SMS, you've got to wait for the email, and sometimes they don't get delivered, right? The spam filters on email are getting better, and they're stopping even authentic emails like Extreme's emails. And the SMS deliverability problem was getting to be really frustrating for a lot of clients. With Cyphlens, there's no deliverability problem, right? If you can access your Extreme website, the code will appear, right? We're not relying on any third party or any email provider or anyone else to actually deliver it. And that itself is just a huge win, that you're always going to get the visual challenge. And you can actually always do it. And it doesn't even require online access on your phone if you don't have it at that moment.
Yeah, and the way that is reflected in our industry, in our business, is support, right? So people come into our support system and say, I didn't get the email, right? Totally out of our control. We deliver it. There's all kinds of spam filters between us and the beneficiary of those payments that may block that email. Everybody understands that. That's a problem. SMS is exactly the same, especially when you start to get to exotic countries. They just don't arrive. And the frustration, security aside, they can't even get into their account. If you don't get that SMS code, if you don't get that email, you're stuck. And so that's a big problem, which this solves.
No, it's great to hear that the latency issue is kind of resolved. There's no, waiting for the code, waiting for the email to come in. So, it's great. I personally always have trouble with that, with all the multi-factor authentication I personally need to use in my own life. So I guess, going into the encryption discussion, we're just talking about MFA, but I think, encryption kind of goes beyond MFA in terms of, both in the world of Cyphlens, right, and in the Extreme world. I guess, where else could, an encryption methodology such as Cyphlens be utilized? If you could give us a few examples, Rocky.
Yeah, look, MFA is just one part of a bigger vision for Cyphlens, right? And I think Rick and the Extreme team saw this early, because the conversation was, look, you're going to solve the MFA problem, and that'll solve your login screen, but the attacks are going to move downstream, right? They're going to move into the payments workflow. They're going to move into all various ways that you're actually interacting after the login screen. And that's where, frankly, none of the other MFA providers have any solutions, and that's where Cyphlens really starts to separate themselves, right? Whether it's a file, a message, or the content itself, like account numbers, that's what we're actually protecting. Cyphlens is designed to protect the content itself, right? And you can put it into any sort of regulated workflow, right? And we're operating in the healthcare industry, we're operating with the government across DoD, and you can now share this content, right, across organizations, across applications, across users, right? And so for Extreme, this translates into more than just secure logins, right? It's about securing the entire payment workflow. I think the vision that we have as we roll this out and activate is you'll start seeing Cyphlens downstream in maker-checker processes, right? End-to-end payments workflow, maybe sharing KYC documents over time, or wire instructions, right? Any sort of client communication, it's really about the clients. Where do we improve their security, their trust in Extreme, their comfort with the way data is being handled, right, to keep it private and tamper-proof? And I think there's at least 7 or 8 additional use cases that on the Extreme side will start to come in, and then clients will really benefit from, right, about believing that their payments provider is secure. And I'll just add one other maybe story from my side, right? I used to work at a large bank. I won't name them, right? And so you can look it up. But we had a lot of the checks and balances, right? All these types of things. And one day, one of the folks, an insider, right, had a change in circumstance, and all of the controls that we put in place, they all failed, right? And Cyphlens helps kind of do that by adding hardware security, right? By everybody having a Cyphlens key on their mobile device, you're introducing a new paradigm into where the payments workflows can be secured, much different than you can today.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, just to based off what Rocky just mentioned, I guess, Rick, where do you see, as the first places outside of multi-factor authentication that you'd look to utilize Cyphlens?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
Well, I just meant maker checker, something like that. Rocky just outlined quite a few items. I think, what are the most viable ones in your opinion?
Well, I think he listed most of them. So pretty much everyone he mentioned, we actually, somewhere in the platform it's used, right? So we will deploy this for starting off with MFA, but we're already, testing with transactions, right? So the actual point of exit of the Extreme system, when you move money out of your wallet to a bank, to a gift card, to a prepaid Visa, whatever the end point may be, that's a security point, okay? So that will be a transaction. When money moves out of the system, we will trigger the process again, hold the phone up, swipe, and instantly make that transfer. Don't have to wait for an SMS, don't have to wait for an email, may not be delivered, all the issues we discussed, right? So that's the first place. There's, like you said, make a checker for, for anybody who's not sure what that is secondary approval. So if you're in a situation where you have employees that are using Extreme that are moving money out of the system or maybe into the system, and there's a secondary or even a tertiary approval required, which is part of the Extreme system, that's an inflection point. That's a security point. That's a moment where you want to have an additional layer of security, and that again is exactly the same simple process. Excuse me, of pointing your phone at the screen and swiping. That gives you that in itself gives the approval, and it can be done on a mobile device. It's a mobile world, obviously. So if people are waiting for their boss to approve something in the Extreme system, wherever they are in the world, shopping, they can just pull the phone out, get an alert, and they can continue the process and get the thing approved, right? So that's the first 2-3 areas. There are others. The third area is, like you said, content, right? We have various places in the system. Rocky mentioned documents around compliance and security that we provide. Yeah, perfect. We can provide them in an encrypted format. And for anybody who wants to imagine this, just imagine kind of those translators you get, where you got the Google translator and you point it at some text that's in a language you don't understand. You point it up and it literally decrypts it on the fly, and your eyes kind of like that, right? You hold the phone up, you press, you can read the content and do as you need. So it's much more than 2FA for us, and that's another reason that we are going to deploy.
That's great. So I guess just to wrap this back to the pain point of the support thing that you guys were mentioning earlier. So in terms of breakage and support, right? What has the SMS issue and the MFA issue, caused in terms of damages or, maintenance that Extreme is needed to, uptake, with these recent issues that's kind of caused the necessity for Cyphlens?
Well, it's hard to measure exactly. There's one area we can measure very clearly, right? And that's something we haven't talked about yet, and that's the cost of SMS messages. Okay, so that industry is evolving, not in a good way. Security aside, the many governments in many countries, exotic countries around the world, have discovered that they can make money out of this, and so they're starting to put fees on SMSs. So the direct effect it had on our business is that our fees for sending SMS messages, which we don't recoup, it's part of our business, right, to trigger these, went from close to zero to increasing to tens of thousands of dollars a month. So we noticed a huge cost that was not there that appeared on our cost side of the equation. And so when we looked into it, we quickly discovered what happened was the governments were starting to charge lots for SMSs in certain countries, and if you didn't pay it, they would not deliver them, right? So immediately we have this cost, and when I talk about examples of the cost increases, it might go from 0.01 of a dollar up to 20, 30, even 40 cents per SMS. And you can imagine that's an enormous cost. Well, that it was compounded by the fact that people creating bogus accounts in our system, which is something that's happens in almost all fintech systems. It's difficult to stop them. Ironically, the Cyphlens system will help with that as well. We're starting to trigger SMS messages around the world just for the heck of it. There's probably an agenda behind that. I don't really understand it, but we noticed a massive intake and the number of SMSs going out of our system that weren't actually particularly utilized by the people using the system. So that compounded the cost. So cost suddenly became an important and bad thing for using SMS, quite apart from the restrictions, the limitations in deliverability and the lack of endpoint security. It was a third factor that really made us dig into this.
Hey, and I'll just add a little bit, right, from our perspective. When you use SMS, it's very interesting because it's not just one vendor, right? You hire somebody to deliver the message, and then you've got all these series of other vendors, which are the telecom carriers. And in any country, there's one or two or three really big ones. Like here in the US, I think we've got 5 or 6, but there are dozens, if not hundreds, of smaller carriers. And they basically keep driving and adding costs. And so some of our advisors are the executives of some of the largest telecom carriers. And we bring up this SMS, security issue and cost issue to them. And their reaction or their feedback to us is SMS was never meant to be used for one-time passcode. It was actually meant to be sharing messages, right, between people, between organizations. And they actually would prefer that people stop using SMS for one-time passcodes, which would eliminate all these problems. And they don't know how to stop it, right? Because they don't want to start getting in the business of telling people what they can and cannot send. But the industry, because they didn't have better solutions, started leveraging these 6-digit codes, right? And figured out a way to leverage it. And now there's going to be a process to get off it, right? And I think Extreme's taking the first step. But that's what, with Cyphlens, it's one single vendor. We're not relying on a telecom carrier or anyone else to deliver these visual challenges. And that means we can give a fixed price, a cost that is understandable for a business, that lets, Richard focus on what he needs to do, which is how to make a great payments experience for his customers and not worry about whether he's going to get a random bill because the security cost is going up that month.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything you guys have said sounds so great about Cyphlens. So I just want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here and pick your brain here, Rocky, about Cyphlens. So in terms of, I know that there's other hardware security keys such as YubiKey for one example. So in terms of security and value, how does Cyphlens compare to an alternative, and what kind of differentiates you guys?
Yeah, so we've already spoken about how we're better than any sort of 6-digit code, right? Whether it's an authenticator app, an SMS, or an email, or anything like that. A YubiKey, for folks who don't know, those are those hardware dongles that you carry around, right? It's a physical piece of specialized hardware. You plug it into your laptop, and it authenticates you. They're really good, right? The security is really good on a YubiKey. Now, the challenge is it's an actual extra piece of hardware that you have to carry around in your pocket. So think about when you go on vacation. Think about when you're not in the office. Think about when you lose those keys, right? How do you keep track of that? How do you secure it? Do you just leave it locked in your desk, right? All these issues start popping up that make it really hard from a friction perspective. And so they're really strong, but they're really hard to scale. By the way, they're really expensive as well. And so we're just providing an alternative, right? We're giving you the same cryptographic muscle that lives on a YubiKey, but we're putting it on your phone and tying it to your physical phone, something you already carry around. Right? So you don't have to worry about, did I forget my YubiKey at home? You're going to have it with you at all times. You're going to have it with you everywhere. And frankly, just to be transparent, right, we deliver it for 80% of the cost of what a typical, or 90% of the cost of what a typical hardware-based MFA would cost. We can provide real value there to folks like Extreme, and fewer support tickets, right? And that means for everyone on the phone, right, everyone's worried about their own companies and their own payments flows. That means everybody's getting enterprise-grade security, right, without the pain or the price tag, right? That's kind of the value prop of what Cyphlens is bringing to market right now.
That's great. So I guess just to, as security and encryption is an evolving, very quickly evolving and rapidly changing, landscape, I guess, what do you guys see for Cyphlens in the future? It seems like there's all these antiquated technologies we're talking about now. Hopefully, we're on the right side of that as well moving forward.
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question. The future of security to us is ambient, right? Always on, always protecting, and never in your way, right? Incredible user experience, right? We're going to use it here in financial services to protect payments. We're going to move it to protecting patient data, maybe even with the DoD and government operations, right? But what excites me is that the same power is available in the same way to every single Extreme user, right? Whether you're sending a payment, using it for KYC, or managing internal approvals, etc., you're getting the same enterprise-grade security that bakes right into your workflow, and it's not bolted on as an afterthought, right? It's not, hey, we created a great payments flow. How do we add security? As we start to kind of integrate Cyphlens, you'll start to realize how this actually becomes what they call security by design, right? You actually build the security into the flow, and that just makes everybody's experience, a lot less stressful, right? Because you don't have to worry about who's logging in and who's moving money. And I think Extreme and Rick get this, right? They didn't want to just protect their customers, right? They wanted to empower them with a better, smarter experience. And that's the kind of future we're trying to build.
Yeah, that sounds great. I guess one other thing I wanted to ask you, Rick. So I guess we're talking about mostly external MFA, client-facing things. I guess there's also the opportunity to internalize all of these functionalities, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done that. In fact, that's where we started. Actually, we deployed it internally for access to our own internal systems, especially on the development side. It's been, it was really successful. I mean, we have, like many companies nowadays, our development team is spread not across the world. We don't have everybody in one place. It's tricky, to manage this, and it gets trickier as that model of remote working expands. So for us, this was the first point, right? And to Rocky's, point earlier, I think anecdotally told a story about how, these things get passed, and it could happen to us. And if it did, it would be bad. So yeah, we deployed it internally first. It works great. That was almost our beta test, and it's a very important part of the whole implementation of Cyphlens.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like, it's really patched quite a few holes in terms of deliverability, vulnerability, and a few other things that I'm probably forgetting to mention right now. But it seems like Cyphlens has really kind of filled a lot of gaps in terms of the Extreme application.
Sure.
So as far as, the conversation today, guys, I really appreciate your guys' time. Rick, Rocky, great to have you guys answer all the questions we had for you. One thing to mention, guys, everybody on this call today, is that we're going to be sending out a follow-up email with a little bit additional context on both Cyphlens and Extreme, and this technology that we're talking about, as well as the issues with SMS and MFA. So once again, thanks for everybody's time today. If you guys do have any questions, like we mentioned earlier, please feel free to send them in the chat now, or if you guys want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the panel, we're open to discussion. We do have a question that was pre-sent to us that we can start with if nobody has a question that's boiling up. Let me take a look at the chat 1 second. It looks like we are good to go. And I'll start with the question that was sent to us beforehand. So the first thing that we were asked was sent to us from Abdul from Saudi. So he asked, can you give us an example of an SMS MFA attack or vulnerability that has negatively affected your business? So I guess, Rick, if you want to take that one on.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a number of them. The one that we had that was most recent was a fake login page. Okay, somebody created a fake login page to Extreme. They literally stripped our user interface, made a fake login page, and what the attempt was to capture it was a time-based OTP. TOTP is the kind of thing that Google Authenticator provides, but it was prompting them for their TOTP. So it was a spoofing attempt, copying our site. It obviously relied on somebody to be fooled that the website was our website, which it wasn't, and was used for grabbing the code. Now they didn't manage to get in. We managed to capture it, but it's they wouldn't have even got there if we got to this deployed Cyphlens right in the first place. So yeah, that was one that comes to mind for sure.
That's great. I think that's an answer that makes sense. So Amanda actually asked us another question. Amanda Kelly says, the comparative SMS cost sounds good. Can you guys please repeat so I understand? So if we could just dive into the cost comparison, whether using Cyphlens as MFA versus SMS.
Rocky, do you want to talk about your side of that?
Yeah, sure. So, and I think the challenge that Rick was facing right at Extreme, their SMS costs started going up, exponentially, right? So what was a relatively known cost, a lot of the telecom carriers are now treating this as a profit center, and that's expounding. So I think they started spending, kind of very little to starting to spend thousands and then tens of thousands of dollars per month on SMSs that didn't even get delivered every time. And that's because their SMS product typically requires at least 2 vendors, right? The SMS kind of software company that says, hey, we'll send these for you, and then a telecom carrier, sometimes more than one. And those telecom carriers are able to then start driving up the pricing on it. So compare that to Cyphlens. In Cyphlens, there's only one vendor. There's no additional telecom carrier, right? We're not relying on someone else to deliver these messages. So that kind of wipes out a huge part of the kind of the supply chain. And that allows us to provide really fixed pricing for Rick and team, right? And frankly, today we're doing it effectively at what he used to pay, right, before the bill started going higher, at a fraction of what the SMS cost is, right? And we're able to do that on a fixed basis, so he knows every month this is exactly what's going to cost, regardless of whether they do 1 million messages or 100,000 messages or even 10 messages. And I think the Extreme team would really agree from an ROI perspective. This was a no-brainer, right, to choose Cyphlens from what they're getting today and where they think this goes in the future from additional payment workflows.
Right. Yeah, I mean so. I mean, just to add to that, it's a combination of 2 things. It's a good deal for everybody, because for us the price is back to kind of where we were, but we're doing 5 times more of it because we're deploying it in multiple places in the system. The volume, obviously, from Rocky's perspective, from his business perspective, is significantly higher than we were doing with the SMS carriers. So it's a win for everybody here.
Sweet. Thanks for answering that, guys. As far as questions, if anybody else has any additional questions, this is all I saw in the chat so far. Feel free to raise your hand. If not,
I've got one question. Do you really work on a beautiful island with trees in the back?
No. I wish. One day though. One day soon.
That's funny. And I live in I'm in an amazing office as well. Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's sunset every day, huh?
Sunset every day. Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Right.
Well, that sounds. It sounds like or from what I see, I don't see any additional questions. If you guys do have any additional questions, please feel free to shoot us an email. If you guys are curious about anything that we discussed today, once again, we're going to be sending up a follow-up after this call is concluding here, and give you guys some additional context. But once again, feel free to shoot any of us an email. We're all ears here.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for your time today, and have a great rest of your guys' day. Cheers.